Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And I know I say at the beginning of every episode how excited I am for this episode and for today's guest, but truth be told, I think we're setting a record for today's episode because this interview has been 2 years in the making. It's been 2 years since we found this amazing guest and reached out to invite him on the show, and finally, we're making it happen today. And it's no surprise to me that after 2 years of anticipation, this guest and I, we were already geeking out together off air. So I said, you know what? Let's hit record because I cannot wait to bring a very brilliant entrepreneurial mind here onto the air for all of us to tune into today. Let me introduce you to him. His name is Joey Boyer. Joey is the founder of Legendary Affinity, where he works with visionaries and purpose-driven leaders to help them align their inner truth with their outer execution. Blending transformational coaching with brand strategy, marketing, and systems design, he supports entrepreneurs in turning their vision into something real, scalable, and impactful. His work sits at the intersection of mindset and mechanics, helping clients not only get clear on what they're here to build, but also equipping them with the strategy, structure, and systems to actually bring it to life. At the core of Joey's philosophy is this: you don't have to choose between impact and sustainability. He helps leaders grow businesses and movements that matter without the overwhelm or burnout that so often comes with it. I am particularly excited about this one here today, so let's dive straight into my interview with Joey Boyer. All right, Joey, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, man. Privileged to be here.
Heck yes. Joey, this has been a long time in the running, and you and I couldn't wait, even before we hit record, to get into the good stuff. But before we start geeking out too much, take us beyond the bio. Who's Joey? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, man, it's 2 years in the making, and so glad to be here. 2 years in the making to be here, but it's been such a journey, and it really all kind of, I'll take you to the high points and the main inflection points for me that really led me to this work. And it all started in college. I was studying for my managerial finance course, or it was a final, and I was in the library, and there was this fellow student of mine came in, and she was so excited, and I was like, man, this is great, like such a wonderful break from the stale textbook. And I really was not a fan of like the finance and accounting stuff, which you have to have to some degree as an entrepreneur. And I was so interested in what she was interested in, and she was going on about how excited she was about this class she just got out of. And I asked her about her major and what she was studying and how she was going to take it into her life, because we were on the verge of graduating. And she told me that, no, this is just like a class I was just kind of taking just for fun. It's like, huh. And that like just piqued my interest and my curiosity. And I started to see this as a pattern throughout life. I started to see that and notice that a lot of my colleagues in college were pursuing paths that they actually didn't really care for. They didn't want to take. And that kind of confused me, and it also, in a way, kind of frustrated me. But I just like put it to the side, and I kept studying for a bit. And it was later down the road where that continued to be a pattern that I would see through college, to the point where my peers who were in the entrepreneurial program were dropping out of the entrepreneurship program and switching. And I was like, guys, we cannot do this. And it continued into my career in corporate when I got out, and I started seeing these incredible individuals with incredible talent just kind of become a bit robotic. They just kind of, and I was witnessing myself in this as well. And so what we found was that so many individuals were just kind of like, I have all these things and these gifts and these passions. I really want to do this stuff, but I can't. I'm not this. I'm not that. Or my parents said this, or I should do this for this paycheck or this thing. And it kind of broke my heart. So I had to lean in. And in 2016, I committed to getting to the bottom of what is this in reality? And so that's kind of like, that's where it all started for me.
Yeah, I love that overview, Joey, because it comes right back to the one thing that I absolutely cut you off on before we hit record. And I was like, wait, you have to stop there because I want to bring this conversation onto the air. And that was even you looking for the meaning and the purpose and the intentionality behind everything in life. And part of that is even the words that we're surrounded by, because you've already alluded to the fact that the messaging around us, the stories around us, of course, the stories that we tell ourselves, all of these things are shaping our reality. And what I cut you off before we hit record with is you were even talking about, you looked deep into what is the meaning of the word entrepreneur. Again, it's one of those phrases that we throw around quite willy-nilly. And somewhere along the way, I think it was 2020, I realized, man, everyone has that word entrepreneur in their Instagram bio now. Does this even mean anything? It's so watered down. Talk to us about that, because it's so clear to me that you're really at going after the heart of things, not the surface level stuff that we all talk about. You know, there's a lot of buzzwords in business. We throw around culture, we throw around AI is a big one these days, obviously. But what is it about getting to the root of those? And when you go into the root of certain things, such as entrepreneurship, what do you find that it actually means?
Yeah. So when you look at the word entrepreneur, and I was literally looking at it just today because I was like, I'm going to know what this word is a little bit more, because I understand what it means in essence, but what is it? Where does it come from? And it comes from, it's a French word, and the entre is like in or among, more accurately, like among or between, and then preneur is like the Italian word like prendere, to grab or to grasp or take hold of. So it's this like take hold of the in between. Originally, that we started seeing the word entrepreneur used between the 16th and 17th century, and it meant someone, from my perspective of studying it, was that this person was like this in between. They were the person in between an idea and a concept, and they took responsibility for it. And at that time, they were taking responsibility for conquests or building large projects like bridges. And often in my mind, because I studied in Italy for a time, I always think about the Medici family. And in Italian, it's, I forget the word exactly, which is ironic because that's what I studied, but it was, it's like entreprendere, and which is like to take upon. It's taking it upon yourself. So all this comes back to entrepreneurship is more than being just a merchant. You're not just like, oh, this thing worked for them, I'm going to flip this good, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. But to understand what an entrepreneur really is, it's closer to an artist. And it is someone who takes full ownership over their idea, the concept that they're connecting to, the vision, which is a large core currently of my work, is that vision is vital. So yeah, that's kind of the core of entrepreneurship from my perspective.
Yeah, I want to go deeper there, and I want to pick on all of us entrepreneurs for a little bit, because Joey, if there's one sweeping generalization that I will make about entrepreneurs, and I've been one myself for 17 years now, and obviously I interview amazing entrepreneurs for a living, and so I think that I've got a large enough sample size to realize and recognize the pattern that in general, entrepreneurs, we over-index in personal development. We love personal development. We love the inner work almost as much as, or sometimes I would argue even more than, we love the outer work. And that's why I so respect and admire and appreciate the work that you do, because you recognize, well, the outer work means nothing without the inner work, and vice versa. Both of them have to work in tandem. And so knowing that entrepreneurs are invested in themselves, are invested in personal development, my pretty broad question to you right now is, where do we get it so wrong? Why is this stuff so much easier to think about and to talk about and to listen to than it is to actually put it into practice?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there, and we could go deep on all these elements. Overall, I think that from my perspective and what you just touched on, there are kind of two poles to the spectrum of entrepreneur. You have the entrepreneur over here who is just like so structured, so like super structured, and they're focused on revenue, and that's their machine, which, kudos to them. Great. I couldn't get myself to be in that place for very long. Like, it just wasn't in my personality. But you have that side, and you have the other polar opposite, which is the person who is basically grossed out by money, and what they just want to end up doing is I just want to be either in fulfillment, or I just want to be in impact, right? I just want to create an impact. That's all I'm here to do. I'm not really going to focus about charging, and they lose out on being able to create something sustainable for themselves. And this is actually kind of where I was at 2 years ago when y'all asked me to come on, was in the midst of understanding these concepts. I was going to a bunch of different seminars and just really going into the deep work. And the first set of seminars and coaching programs I entered were to help the individuals who were either so much on the side of just impact and they didn't have the structural component that they were losing out. And then the other side of individuals, and this was a wake-up call for me as well, was when I went there and I saw all of these white-haired gentlemen who were there and they were multimillionaires and they just looked lost. And I was like, what are you here, man? Like, why are you here, man? Like, it seems like you've got it, like you're good, you've made it. And they're just like, it's great, like I made millions, but I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what the purpose of all that was. And so what I realized in that moment, have continued to realize, is that where we go wrong is thinking that they're somehow separate, and they're not. It's about the three main components that I found in my work are, you have to bring them together. And it's impact, fulfillment, and prosperity. You have to be able to bring those together. How do I want to prosper in this world? How do I, and that doesn't have to be the thing that leads, but for those who are super creative and impactful, you need to think about how this is also going to help you prosper, right? Because that's a gift to you and to your family and to everyone else. And for those who are so focused and naturally inclined to creating something that is a prosperity engine for themselves, they must also look at impact and fulfillment. Does the work fulfill you? And I was on that polar opposite at a time as well. I created a business and it was going quite well, but I burned out very quickly because I was only focused on making money. And that went where it went pretty quickly, and I learned that you have to bring them together. So I think that's kind of like the starting point, and we can dive into any of those.
Yeah, Joey, it's funny. In more than 1,400 episodes, I've never brought this up. This is the first conversation that I'm making this public in, is that one of my recent fascinations and where I've gone deep, I think we all go down deep rabbit holes. For me, it's late at night. The later I stay up, I'm going to go down some rabbit holes, especially with AI these days. And my most recent fascination totally has been Taoism. I am so intrigued by Taoism. And obviously at the root of Taoism is really just, the simple translation of the way. And in Taoism, a lot of the studies and teachings talk about water, because water is such a perfect illustration of water doesn't care about finding, someone told me that this was going to be the path. Water simply follows the way downhill, the way to its destination. That's what water does. And if there's a giant rock in the way, the water doesn't cry about it. The water simply splits around the rock, and the water will always find that way. Hearing you talk about the key intersection between these three things, I think every single one of us entrepreneurs, we've grappled with that a million times before, and we'll continue to grapple with it, let's face it. But along there is that sometimes we tend to force these things because we live in a world where hustle culture is applauded. I see that. I don't use social media anymore, but I remember when I would post on social media, and in my early 20s, I would post a late night story and I would say, hustling until 4 a.m. That got all the likes. Whereas me living life in a much more sustainable way didn't get as much applause as hustle culture got me. And so, Joey, I don't know how all these things link together, but I'm sure that there's a lot of things that reveal themselves in your work. Talk to us about the way. Talk to us about being like water and essentially following the right path instead of forcing it, because one of the things you and I talked about off air is also creating space. So I'd love to hear more about how all this shows up in your work.
Oh, dude, it's so good. Oh, this is beautiful. Yeah, at the end of the day, for an entrepreneur, and what I have found is that your vision is vital, and your vision is the way. Like that is the way, and it is the thing that's important to understand about this concept of way, or this path, which is interesting that it's in a lot of spiritual teachings and texts, is that it's not about a destination. So that's one thing that we need to understand, is we need to remove ourselves from this idea of we're going to one day arrive at here, and you just don't. You need to understand that it is a constant just way of being. You have to align yourself with your real authentic way of being. And that honestly is probably the absolute largest barrier I have seen in when I was helping people do marketing, when I was running a marketing agency. The biggest barrier I saw was that people just didn't actually know, even if they had large companies. I served large companies, and I served enterprise companies, and I served small single owner startups as well. And the thing that they all have in common, the barrier they have run into, is thinking that there's some kind of destination, there's something that they're reaching for that they can never reach. And if we accept that, and we instead approach our vision and what actually wants to come through us into the world with curiosity without judgment, then we'll find that the path will be much, much easier. And if you can be honest with yourself and others in that way, you will also find others on that same or similar path. And that's something that only has been very recently happening for me, and it's such a blessing. So to bring it together, your vision is something that will always unfold. It's something that's incredibly vital for your life and for the scaling of a sustainable and successful business, or whatever it is, organization that you're creating. Yeah.
Joey, I'm going to use myself as a terrible example here because I went to business school and I always knew that I wanted to start a business. And so I loved our junior year class project, where the school that I went to outside of Boston, it was very cool. They brought in real life businesses, brand new startups in the Boston area, and they assigned us college kids to write business plans. Did they use them? I have no idea. But the point is that we had to create a business plan. And what is on a business plan? Well, of course, you need to have some sort of objective. And for all of us college students, what sounded like a very nice objective for a local new business? To make $1 million. It's a nice round number. To us, that was an objective. And I think that going through business school, we confuse that tangible objective. Or, you know what, I'm actually going to use even more business school terminology to throw even more shade, is we're taught so much about KPIs. You know, we've got to have these key performance indicators. And I think that the way traditionally we've learned about business, we conflate those KPIs and those objectives and goals with the vision. And I don't think we've ever been taught what an actual vision is, how to find that vision, what questions to ask to arrive at that vision. Joey, I will say, as someone who has gone deep into your work leading up to today's conversation, and I've had plenty of time to do so, vision shows up in a very big way in all of your messaging, in the way that you show up in the world. So guide us there. What is a vision? How's it different from those KPIs that I'm obviously throwing shade on? And then what are the questions? What's the process for us to arrive at what that vision is?
Yeah. So I also went to business school, so resonate with that concept of KPIs and OKRs and every other possible term we could find. And it is important to have those, but at the end of the day, especially in our world right now, there's so much change. You have to create something that you can surf on all this change, and that you're going to be far more comfortable than trying to root down, in going back to the water analogy, moving waters. And so how do we create a craft on which we can maneuver, right, effectively, and in a way that is true to us, in a way that doesn't rock the boat so much that it disturbs the team, for example. That's a huge one if you're interested in culture, and I am. And so what that always came back to for me was, and not until I received some really deep coaching on vision, like why does this vision stuff actually matter, and how do we get away from the fancy and somewhat cheesy interpretations of vision that we would usually see on a corporate, like a boardroom or something, which was really just like this sentence or couple sentences that it really just seemed like they pulled out of the sky, and it doesn't really land. So what is vision in the process? I'll first say the process, a way to start to understand your vision, because if you move too quickly and try to make it concrete, it loses its potency, which is kind of strange. Like, vision is almost like it's a relationship you build with this concept of basically why. If I did have the KPIs and I did achieve them, why does it matter? Right, that's one way. Just start to have, if you develop curiosity and like, what do I really care about? And why do I want to do certain things? Why do those things matter? If I did achieve, this is something else we walk through, because often people will think that they have a certain vision for something. And then you can ask why like 7 times, and that will start to get you closer. And you'll notice when you start asking these questions on why, you'll notice that there are reactions inside of you that will respond with some resistance, even irritation, even frustration, sometimes sadness, sometimes grief, because it's like you start to realize that, well, maybe you never looked at it, and maybe those things that really matter to you are finally being looked at, and there's so much there. And that's also part of the big part of the work, is just moving through those layers. So overall, to start with that concept, ask why. Get curious with yourself. Like, why does this thing that I'm pursuing really matter? And if I accomplished it, what would the next layer be? And go like 7 layers deep. And so that overall is like kind of starting that conversation with yourself and with your vision. And then we would build it into an actual statement. But I feel like the questions are more important than creating a statement, at least at first.
Joey, I almost feel bad going into this next line of questioning with you, but I feel like as a podcast host, part of this is that we have to bring these conversations public. And hearing you talk about this work and imagining the work that you do with your real life clients, where my head goes is we're all impatient people, and we're certainly impatient entrepreneurs. And I'm sure the topic comes up of, why do I have to do that stuff? Can't I just skip that work? And we've all been there. We've all done brand strategy without finding our vision. We've all done marketing without understanding our why. We've all tried to design systems without doing any of this stuff that you and I are talking about today. Talk to us about the cost of not doing that work. How does it manifest How does it manifest in our lives, in our businesses, in our results, in our growth trajectories? I'm sure you've seen both sides of that coin, because the biggest alternative to doing the work is, in a way easier alternative, is to skip the work, to not do it. So how's that show up?
I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to do it whether you know it and whether you like it or not. Like that's really the core of it. Like either you will, and it could happen on this is a friend of mine. He told me, he was like, what would your 80-year-old self say about this decision? What would your 80-year-old self say about, and that was a wake-up call for me, because at the end of the day, you're going to do this work either on your deathbed or you do it now. And you don't have to do it all now. And I don't mean to make it morbid, but like, that's kind of like, at the end of the day, like, what's really going to matter? So, can you ask the question once more? I got on my own.
Well, Joey, you got into my head with that answer as well, because here's what I just heard. I'm going to totally use me as the example here. What I just heard from you is you're going to end up doing the work either way. Let's go all the way back to when I graduated college. I started a marketing agency. I feel like so many of us did fresh after college, because we are into tech and we understand new concepts and all of that. And so I didn't do any of this work. And as soon as you said you're going to do the work anyways, a light bulb went off in my head, because I realized, dang, that business didn't work out ultimately. And I got super burned out along the way. And I did not enjoy the nature of the work that I was doing. Why? Because that was the way for me to do this work that I thought I was skipping, is I was actually in the work, because when I crashed hard and had to shut that agency down, those were some of the most fulfilling and breakthrough years of my life, reflecting on why didn't that work out? Because the truth is, I'm even getting goosebumps just from your answer, is that me avoiding the work led to me failing and eventually finding the work. That helped me to find some of the answers. So a lot of people are going to be hearing this, Joey, and thinking to themselves, well, I would like to learn from you guys here today. And Joey, I'd like to learn from you, because you do brand design and you do marketing and you do strategy and and transformational coaching along the way. What does that process look like for someone who's never had a guide such as yourself to go this deep with them? What's that process look like to work with someone like you?
Well, it's different for every person. Depends what stage they're at. And I have spent, just so resonant with what you were saying, because that was kind of like what led me to finally the crash and burn, was also a marketing agency that I was scaling about, it was around 2022 when I started to taper that, and we did really well. We were at multiple 6 figures, which was under a year, and we're like, oh, this is great, and all this, and I was just like, yeah, this isn't it, and it's just not the result I was really looking for. Anyway, so what does the work look like? Yeah, eventually, either you want to start something and you want to actually have the intentionality to be able to move through your path of entrepreneurship, or you will reach a point like we did, and you burn out and realize, wow, I was really missing something. This is not sustainable. And so the work, from my perspective, the way I approach it, is in one of 3 kind of parts of the cycle that I found that entrepreneurs experience. And the first part is just to be. It's like, it sounds very esoteric, and it kind of is, but you're not going to be able to create anything meaningful if you cannot be present with what is real for you, what's real with your vision, what's real in your world, what's real contextually. And some people might call it regulating your nervous system. So that's the first part. And I became a breathwork practitioner as well, just to facilitate this part for my clients. So if I notice that someone is really just like frantic and they're just all over the place, which a lot of times we can't get, nothing wrong with that. We take time to just be and just kind of calm down and come back to really who we are. And then the second stage is become. Who do you need to become to reach that vision? Because we think that it's something that we need to build, but in reality, it is something that you have to align with yourself. Like, how does this person, this version of me who has created and has brought this vision into the world, what's their character like? How are they operating? What are they doing? Right? So that's the become. And the last part is build. And so that's then where we get into systems. That's where we get into marketing and brand and automation and the visuals and the stuff that we think about. And so that's like the macro path. And it's also the micro path I encourage even in your day. If you're trying to build something, you're like, I'm not feeling great. Take a moment to be. And then think about, who do I need to become to actually do this task beautifully and well, and how I want it to come into the world. So it's kind of like a fractal. It's like a micro and a macro.
Yeah, gosh, I'm so grateful for the way you articulate and share that, Joey. There's so much food for thought, and I think it's going to hit all of us and each of us a little bit differently based on where we are in our natural seasons of business, seasons of life. I wish that I heard you speak 15 years ago when I was super early on in my entrepreneurial journey. And I'm grateful that I'm hearing you now, 17 years into my entrepreneurial journey. And so with all of those things in mind, one thing you and I didn't geek out about off air, but I'm sure that you do geek out about it, as I very much do, again, especially late at night, is of course AI. And I will throw this out there, that one thing that I'm super grateful for with AI is that it's always equally willing as I am to go down any rabbit hole that I choose. And part of those rabbit holes, and I think a lot of us use AI in this way, is personal reflections and self-reflections, and to ask me questions. A lot of times we can't read the label from inside the jar. I can't even think of what questions to ask myself. I'd love an outside perspective. What's your take on how AI is shaking up this work? Because throughout your years, I mean, even dating back to your marketing agency, I'm sure that you've seen so many shifts in the way this work is done thanks to AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, AI is, it's really, from my perspective, it's an accelerant. You know, it's an amplifying agent, and we're going to only continue to see it be easier and easier to create pretty much anything. It already is. Like, AI has been very helpful in my work, but also it requires, like everything, a great amount of mindfulness, because as an amplifying agent, it takes responsibility. We need to be responsible and actually have a clear directive to give it and give ourselves, right? Because we can get lost in all of those rabbit holes. And I have custom GPTs in a series of workflows that I've created for these GPTs to help me see myself more clearly. I also have some that just help me think more clearly. And those are some of the ways I'm currently using it, and trying to be mindful about how quickly I go straight into having it be part of my workflow process, because it's important for us to have integrity as entrepreneurs and know why we're creating something and know why it matters. So I think that's something we're going to see more and more of, and either we'll continue as humans collectively to create more noise and things that really aren't necessary, or we will get real with ourselves on what it is that we want to see in the world, what we want our children to see in the world, or our grandchildren. I mean, please, let's think about that as stewards, right? We're entrepreneurs. We are stewards of the work and the vision and the things, our crafts, right? So my hope is that with artificial intelligence, we can use this pivotal point in humanity to bring more beauty into the world, considering the future generations, and kind of maybe hopefully move from this kind of like hypey and it can do everything kind of place, because it can.
Yeah, so well said. And Joey, I think both you and I are a little bit too young to remember the main come up of the internet. And so I think about that time period. How beautiful was the world that the world shrank thanks to the internet. How many people, again, random example using myself, is that when I moved to Los Angeles, all of a sudden I had some sort of allergy that was showing up on my hands, and I didn't know who to turn to. Of course, I turned to the internet, and I found this entire community of people online who are allergic to nickel. Who would have ever thought that there are communities of people who are also allergic to nickel? And so much of that is thanks to the internet, and perfectly said the way that you said it, which is, I hope that AI makes us a better humanity. So much of the AI conversation is about potential replacement and hysteria and all of that, but we have the opportunity to become better humanity thanks to new technologies and powerful technologies. So, Joey, I knew that time would fly by with you today, but I've got to put you on the spot one last time because it's a super broad question that I ask at the end of every interview, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are very much one of us, a fellow entrepreneur? What's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
I feel like, with our conversation, I'll kind of go off the thread, just especially with AI and all the change, and just with the way we can show up better in the world. Take the time to be really curious of like what it is that you truly want to create and bring into the world, and go into those layers, and be true to that. We need more entrepreneurs who are also visionary in solving real world problems, and a lot of people are called to do that, but they don't believe in themselves. So get curious and know that you're worthy of that. You're worth that.
Yes, Joey, and gosh, do I hope that today is the spark for so many people to start to do this inner work. And I hope that quite a bit of listeners out there say, you know what? I want more Joey in my life. I want to reach out and have a conversation with him. And Joey, you put so much good stuff into the world, so I'm excited for listeners to find you online. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. It's you can find me on, I'm starting Instagram back up, and then YouTube as well, and you can find me at It's Joey Boyer. Yeah, that's it. It's Joey Boyer.
Yes, and listeners, you already know we're making it as easy as possible for you to find Joey across the internet down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So if you're on the go, if you're driving, do not worry about taking notes. Do not worry about texting it to yourself. You can refer right back to the show notes from today's episode, and you'll find Joey's links right there. You can click right on through. Otherwise, Joey, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Absolutely pleasure.